Hello and welcome to this week's YouTube video. Do your paintings struggle with life? Do you feel they look unconvincing? In this week's video, I'm going to show you how selecting a central point of focus in your paintings will dramatically improve them. I'm going to be using this recent commission of Winnie that I did to illustrate my points. So let's get into the video and I will speak about what I'm doing as I'm going along. You will notice with the final painting that there isn't a lot of information other than in the eyes and nose. Notice how that muzzle is merely suggested, as is the fluffiness of that neck. The soul of this painting is in those eyes, but the nose is also important for giving the lower section of the painting some context, especially as there is such little detail everywhere else. Notice how a painting needs very little information to work. You just need to select a few choice areas and focus on those. If you are painting an animal or even a person, it is much easier to choose your central point of focus, as usually it is quite obvious in your subject. If you are painting a landscape or perhaps some foliage, then choose one area of the composition to focus on. For example, perhaps a flower, or maybe a building in the landscape, or a particularly nice tree. Once you have picked your central point of focus, you can then construct your painting around it, and there are a number of tricks you can employ to guide your viewer to this area. Remember that the eye sees in a particular way. We call it an iris blur. This is where the central point of interest is sharp, and as we move away from this area, it becomes more blurred. In this painting, notice how I have really edited out the detail in the ears, neck and shoulder. I have mimicked how the eye sees. I have used a much more rendered effect with my brushwork in the eyes and nose, and then made it looser outside of the face. I've used much smaller brushes where I'm trying to get a more controlled detail effect, and I've used larger brushes where I want it to be looser. Notice also my edges. I have used sharper hard edges around the nose and eyes, whereas these edges here around the muzzle are much softer and less defined. Notice in the lower neck area, I lose my edges altogether and let my background merge into my dog. This use of hard, soft and lost edges helps reaffirm that I want my viewer to focus on the eyes, which are my central point of focus. You can do this effect in your own paintings too. If you would like to know more about edges, then have a watch of this video on my channel. Let's have a look at my palette for this painting. I am using cadmium yellow light, yellow ochre light, transparent yellow oxide, cadmium red, alizarin crimson, transparent red oxide, ultramarine deep and titanium zinc white. I have also mixed up a few other colours. These are a black red and a black green. When I mix these two together, they give me a rich black that I use as my darkest value. I also have a purple, two oranges and another green. Notice how narrow the values are in my dog's fur. This means I'm going to have to use temperature to suggest the form of the dog's face. The colour of Winnie's fur is mainly an orange-yellow. I therefore choose a blue-purple as my background colour. Blue and orange, yellow and purple are both opposite colours, so I know this will work as a combination and give me some good separation between dog and background. But I need to be careful that I include some of my yellow-orange in my background. You can see it in these areas here, and some of my blue-purple in Winnie. You can see it where I added it to her light areas. They are very cool. The colour I have used for the background is this purple here plus my white. I have also added more of this blue plus white into this mix around the very edges of the canvas. This gives me a very cool temperature. I have also added what we call a bridging colour here, where I mix my oranges into my background colours. Whilst I want a separation of object and background, I don't want them to exist totally independent of each other. I want my object to be integrated into that background. This is a great trick to do in your own paintings. Try mixing a bit of your background colour into your object colour and use it as a bridging colour between your object and your background. It doesn't need to be as thick as mine. Often, a few obvious strokes is enough. The colours in Winnie are much trickier because her values are so subtle. I use this orange as my base colour and then adjust from there. If I want it to be cooler, I add some of my background colour. Remember, blue will mute orange and purple will mute yellow. So if your colours are too saturated, try adding a bit of its colour opposite to the mixture. If I want to push my base colour yellower, I use either my yellow ochre light if it is warmer or my cadmium yellow if I want it a bit cooler. Where it is more of a pinky orange, I use this orange here. When I add white to this orange, it will behave differently to this orange. The transparent red holds its colour better when mixed with white and will give me a much stronger, more saturated colour than this orange, which is made up of opaque and semi-opaque colours. This is why I have a number of transparent paints on my palette. Try experimenting with transparent colours. You'll notice the difference in your mixing. If you'd like to know more about the properties of your paint, then have a look at these videos on my channel. Where I want to darken my orange for the ear areas, I can add either this black red, which will give me a warm dark, or I can add this purple. This will be a cooler dark, so it just depends what temperature I am aiming for. If I add yellow ochre light to this mix, this will give me a brown. But how warm that brown is depends on whether I use this black red or my purple to darken my orange. It is dark enough to give me these lovely browns you see around the eyes. If I zoom in really close to the eyes, you'll notice I always try and lay a warmer colour next to a cooler colour. Notice I have a really warm pupil, a cooler iris, a warm eyelid, and cooler areas of fur around it. It is this shift between warm and cool that will bring your painting to life. It is very important. The browns I am working with contain a lot of orange. Adding blue will instantly cool them down. Remember, mixing opposite colours together will always give you a brown. Therefore, if you are working in neutrals, try and work out what is the main colour in that neutral and then add its colour opposite to give you a cool version of that colour. I mentioned earlier that your brushwork can really help define your area of interest. I tend to use a small round brush where I want to add detail. Remember, the smaller your brush, the more strokes you will add, the more rendered the area will look. If you want looser strokes, then pick a larger brush and try and describe that area in fewer strokes. This sort of brush will give you a much softer effect than something like a flat brush, so think about which brush you need. I don't always opt for my Eclipse combers as I move outside this area. Sometimes I just use a really large flat brush which will give me more expressive strokes. Creating contrast between a highly rendered area and much more expressive areas will force your viewer to look at your central point of focus, which are my eyes. To recap then, when choosing and working with a central point of focus, do the following. Choose only one focal point in your painting. Create an iris blur effect in your painting by varying your edges between hard for your central point of focus, soft as you move away from this area, and lost as you move into your background. Create contrast between your focal point and the rest of your painting. You can do this in a number of ways through dramatic value changes, temperature shifts, or brushwork. Use bridging colours between your object and background to help integrate them into each other. Use the most appropriate brush for the area you are working on. I hope you have enjoyed today's video and found it useful. Please like and subscribe if you can, and check out my website sarahhallidayart.com, where you will find examples of my work and also details of online classes that I run. Thank you for watching, and see you for the next one.